You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
T-Wolves explode in the fourth quarter. They survive. Final score versus the Bulls, 135-119. What's going on back in the lab? Back at it. Another T-Wolves POSTCAST episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Jack Borman. Give him a follow at GRBorman13. And Jack, plenty to break down tonight, including the Wolves giving up 65 points at halftime to the Bulls. And more importantly, how they found a way to come back and win it. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account. You use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, man, Wolves trying to make it 2 in a row. Remember, they dominated Charlotte on Monday. Then they got a couple days of rest. And tonight, well, I mean, here's your text to me, an hour before tip-off. Bulls, by the way, on their second of a back-to-back, their third back-to-back of the season already. They just lost by, 20 the night before. And last but not least, most importantly, they're playing without Lonzo, no Levine, I believe, as well. So anyways, your text was, if this is a nail-biter, something will have gone extremely wrong. So Jack, 65 points given up at halftime. Maybe start at the top. We'll work our way down. The Bulls shot, 60%? It felt like they couldn't miss for at least the first 2 quarters, if not 3. Was it props to Chicago night? Like, all right, just give them a pat on the back kind of thing? Or was the Wolves defense just that bad, especially early on?
Yeah, I mean, just for some context, the Bulls had lost their last 2 games, both of which were without Levine. Right. So, and they had an 103 offensive rating so far this season without Zach LaVine on the court, which would be the worst which would be the worst offense in the NBA extrapolated over the course of a whole season. But like you said, 65 points in the first half. They had an 141 offensive rating in the first half, which is obviously tremendous. They had 20 assists on 24 made field goals. And I think that was the stat that summed it up the best for me. Just that, the Timberwolves defensive rotations in the first half were really poor. And, Chicago was able to pretty easily get into the paint and then kick the ball out, and they just kept passing up good shots for great shots, and and would attack overzealous closeouts and just continue to find the open man. And they refused to seemingly end a possession without taking a bad shot in the first half, and that was because the Timberwolves defense, like I said, just bad rotations, weren't communicating very well, weren't getting back in transition. There were a lot of semi-transition trailer threes that we saw. We saw Vucevic get hot. But I mean, Chicago, I think they started 7 of 7 from 3 or 6 of 6 from 3. So certainly, you have to give them props for making the shots, no question about it. And coming into this game, I mean, Chicago's got plenty of guys that are shooting really, really well from 3. I mean, I think Levine, Vucevic, Josh Giddey, and Kobe White were all shooting north of 38 or 39% on pretty good volume so far this season. And Patrick Williams, who started 3 of 3 from 3, I believe, in this game, is also a good 3-point shooter and is only shooting like 32% from 3 so far this season. So, they certainly have guys that were able to do it, but I think, again, got to pat them on the back for making shots. And something too, coming into this game that certainly popped in that first half as well, was that the Bulls play at the fastest pace of any team in the NBA so far this season. Man. And that's really fueled a lot of how they've been able to get into the lane and spray it out for threes. And in the Timberwolves, funny enough, are a team that likes to play slower, but in the 3 games they've played this season that have had the slowest pace, the fewest number of total possessions, those are all 3 games that they've lost so far this season. But I think that's kind of a little bit more of an outlier, I think, considering the way that we saw this team really suffocate teams in the half court defensively last season. And that's been more of their identity, especially with Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert. And I think we started to see more of that later in the second half. But I thought the way that the Timberwolves really started to turn it around defensively, just to stay on that point, was that, I thought Chris Finch made a really interesting decision in that third quarter where he decided to take Rudy Gobert out. And normally you would then say, okay, if Rudy's not going to be on the floor, we're going to be getting those Randle and Reed minutes that we've become accustomed to seeing so far early in this season. But he did something very different. He kept Jaden McDaniels in there and broke Jaden McDaniels' normal rotation pattern, where Jaden played the entire the entire third quarter. And that's something he normally does not do. And you went with a lineup that had Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Naz Reid in there. And they were able to fly around defensively, rotate a lot better against a small ball Bulls lineup that really wanted to just play with a lot more pace and space and really kind of take advantage of having to bring Rudy Gobert out on the perimeter to guard Vucevic. And I thought that was an interesting change, so that when Chicago had a lineup in there at the start of the fourth quarter that had a little bit less spacing, wasn't going to play quite as fast, was going to play a little bit more in the half court, that Gobert would be out there to start the fourth quarter and really help kind of clog things up. And that's exactly what happened. So I think, for the Wolves to turn it around the way that they did, that certainly was something too that Chris Finch deserves credit for, with the way that he kind of structured his rotation in the second half.
Yeah, 100%. Well said there. This was a game where it's like, if you never watched any NBA, if you didn't know the standings, there was times you would have been convinced the Bulls were like the best offensive team in the NBA. But nonetheless, to your point, thankfully they found a way to claw back. They leave with a dub. So this is all a lot easier pill to swallow and kind of easier to discuss, because they won. Had they lost this game, a game like this, to a team like this too, and then dropped to 4-4, even this early in the season, for me, it would have felt like, are we watching the Wolves from 2 years ago? Like when they beat the Lakers and Nuggets one night, but then they'd lose to like a bottom 5 team the very next game. Mute point. Nonetheless, I mean, they get it done. I want to say too, in large part of that explosion in the fourth quarter, but Julius Randle before that point really felt like he kept things afloat. He was kind of the anchor offensively they really needed. What have we learned about him, I guess, his role here through these 9-game samples that we got? I mean, how huge was he tonight? Or even, again, you can talk about broader, just the entire offense as a whole, that fourth quarter. Julius, Ant, Gobert, they all exploded. That's got to be worth something as well, knowing maybe they can turn it on in a crunch time situation like that when it got kind of dire in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think we'll start with Randle. I think Julius Randle deserves all of his flowers for what he did in this game. I think if you look at the box score, especially not watching this game, it may get lost a little bit what he did for the Timberwolves in this game. Again, had 22 points on 8 of 15 shooting, 10 rebounds, his first double-double as a Timberwolf, and only 3 assists. You're like, all right, that's a good game, solid game. But it doesn't really stand out too much from Gobert having 21, 9, and 3 himself. But I think what Randle really did is, and what we've seen from him so far this season, and the two things that he's really brought to the table offensively is number one, his playmaking in the mid-range, especially in the way that he's been able to kick the ball out and create open 3-point shots for his teammates. We saw that in the fourth quarter especially. But what Randle did for the majority of the second quarter that I was really impressed with was the way that he can play bully ball. And if you want to play bully ball, with Julius Randle, you better strap in and have your pads on and,
go get that icy hot from Shaq. Yeah,
exactly. It's going to be a low man wins and, just a battle in the paint. And when I think that the stretch that really defined that Randle was kind of going to be the guy that wouldn't let the team lose or fall behind 15, 20 points, was he checked back into the second quarter. And he really didn't have a super active first quarter, especially defensively, in my view. Wasn't super competitive, but checks in. His first offensive possession, he gets not 1, but 2 extremely contested offensive rebounds that were just grown man rebounds, puts the ball back in, and then gets a pick 6 on the next defensive possession to really kind of help give the Wolves some momentum and kind of keep them afloat for the majority of that second quarter. He ended up having 9 points and 4 rebounds in that quarter, which was really important for them. And I think so much of over the course of a basketball game is, if your teammates don't have it, how much time can I buy them to kind of get back in the game and, find their rhythm and be able to contribute the way they're used to contributing, especially like you just pulled up here, especially considering that the Bulls are on the second night of a back-to-back. And then if you can just hold out until reinforcements come, especially against a tired and shorthanded team, that's going to pay dividends over the long run. And that's exactly what happened once we got to the fourth quarter. Again, that lineup that I talked about at the end of the third quarter, that went small was really important. We're able to score enough and kind of stem the tide and chip away at that Bulls lead. I think they got it down to either 5 or 6 at the end of the third quarter. And then at the start of the fourth quarter, you've got to give a lot of credit to Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle, and Rudy Gobert. That first unit played awesome defense. They won by 5 in the first, or they won by 6 in the first 5 minutes. And then, the floodgates just opened. You had Julius Randle create a corner 3 for Anthony Edwards. He comes back down in transition and makes another one. All of a sudden, the Timberwolves are up by 7 points. And they just ran away with it from there. I think in the fourth quarter, Ant, Julius, and Rudy outscored the Bulls 28-19 when they were on the floor. They were 7 of 7 from 2, 3 of 3 from 3, made all 4 of their free throws, had 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 0 turnovers. I understand that, the Bulls are shorthanded. They're not an awesome team. But that's exactly how you want your stars to be able to close out a game. And in that fourth quarter, 45 points for the Timberwolves, their most in a quarter this season. I don't think they scored more than that in a quarter all of last season either, if I'm not mistaken. And they shot 71% from the floor, and they made 6 of their 11 threes. So overall, just a really fun way for them to bounce back. But again, I don't think that the Timberwolves are in position to be able to have one of those explosive fourth quarters without what Julius Randle did in that first half, especially to help keep them afloat.
Yeah, 100%. He was phenomenal. We could spend another 20 on Julius's performance tonight, but also just what he's meant for this offense, specifically these first 9 games. Plenty more deep dive to get into. I want to talk about Jaden McDaniels' huge bounce back game. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel's giving you a chance at a huge return, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed with your first $5 wager with FanDuel. When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you're placing your bets. Again, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 wager. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Get in on some NBA future action while you're there. Anthony Edwards, MVP odds, sitting at 14-1. Feels like some great value. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 wager. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Okay, before we get to J-Mac, he had a great bounce-back game we got to talk about. I wanted to ask you real quick. We got a 9-game sample size now. Tell me what similarities you've seen from this year's defense to last year's. Obviously, last year's defense, #1 in the league in multiple categories. But also, what are maybe one of the top 1 or 2 things that look different to you? And I guess, are they correctable, or is this just how things are going to be more nights than not? Like, what's the big differences defensively from last year to now?
Yeah, I think #1, the Timberwolves are allowing a ton of points in the paint. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now with you. You just put me on the spot, but the Timberwolves were for sure top 5 and fewest points in the paint allowed last season. And they are absolutely in the top 5 in most points per game allowed defensively so far this season. I just don't think that they've taken enough pride in defending the perimeter quite as well as they did last year. I think their ball contained and the way that they kept ball handlers just out of the paint in general was tremendous last season between Jaden, Nickeil, and Ant. And I just don't think you've seen the same defensive intensity, especially from Jaden and Ant thus far. I think Nickeil has been tremendous. And I think too, some of that has to do with, Dante's new out there, and some of the rotations and lineups we're seeing at different points in the game are very different than what they were last year, just in terms of what guys are asked to do while they're on the floor, specifically with Nas. And I think, the more that they kind of figure that out, I think the more that they'll get back to last season, just because, they were a very good defense last season. Most of the minutes from last season are returning this season. You see 6 of the top 8 guys are all the same in the rotation. It's just, swapping out Kyle Anderson for Dante, and then swapping out, obviously Cat for Julius is just a little bit different. And I think at times they've struggled too with defensive rebounding, and especially when Gobert is not on the floor. So I think that they're going to have to clean that up. I don't think they've defended pick and roll either as well without Gobert on the floor. So I'd say with those two things, you probably just got to give Naz Reid a little bit of time to kind of reacclimate to playing the 5, because he was probably thinking coming into this season, I'm going to be more of a 3 than I am a 5 up until that trade. So that certainly complicates things. But I think at the start of the fourth quarter, what you saw is still very similar to last season's team, is that Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert are more than capable of just swallowing an offense alive if you don't have great spacing out there. And this team is going to continue to do very, very well against teams that don't shoot the 3 super well, or against certain 5-man units out there that don't have a lot of spacing, and and are relying on playing isolation and things like that. So when teams are forced to play more of that kind of a style, I think this defense is still going to feast. It's just a matter of, okay, can they shore up some of the communication, and and guys just kind of getting used to where each other are defensively, and how they like to play, and how different it is with Rudy out there and having that that stopgap back there versus not, and how the defense has to rotate behind when Rudy's not out there. So I think it's just small things like that. But again, like tonight is more of a night where I think the offense just hung in there and were able to make enough big time shots to bail your defense out. But again, we'll see how it continues to evolve. But I think early in the season, but I don't think it's crazy that you would expect this team's offense, or how much the team's offense can improve can offset how much the defense dips. I think that that's certainly possible. I think that they were like 20th in offense last season, and they were the number 1 defense. I think if there's something like 6th or 5th in defense, and they're 9th or 10th in offense, I think that that's still, a really good recipe for this team to still be knocking on the door of the Western Conference Finals again.
100%. You'll take that ratio, I think, every time. And it's funny, speaking of offense, how much can change in just a game or two in this league. Last episode, the hot question was, what's going on with J-Mac? He was struggling offensively, almost no identity, kind of, no consistency anyway. Even the defense kind of looked out of sync at times too. Tonight he comes back, huge bounce back game, 19 points, 6 for 7 from the floor, 3 for 3 from 3 land. So just because he's become such a talking point early on in the season, I expect there to be some ebbs and flows with that discussion. But I just wanted to quickly kind of check in on his almost stock, so to speak, and how encouraged you are to finally see him kind of look like himself again.
Yeah, I think, again, so with Jaden McDaniels, he's someone who certainly benefits from playing in offenses that have, or offensive lineups that have more spacing. You look at last season, the season before, the one player that he had the best cohesion with, and the numbers bear it out in terms of it being his top 2-man, lineup pairing by net rating, is Karl Anthony Towns. And obviously Karl's not here anymore. And so I think the more that you can try to get Jaden McDaniels with Naz Reid, like we saw in that third quarter, I think the more spacing that you have out there on the floor, the more that you'll allow him to utilize, his length and his ability to drive and be able to finish around and over defenders is really important. We saw some highly impressive drives from him at different points in this game. But again, the 3-point shooting, man, like his 3-point shot looked super confident, super smooth, super in rhythm tonight. And the other night against Charlotte, the 3 misses that he had in the first quarter weren't even close. Mm-hmm. So I think for him, it's just a confidence thing. And you're going to see Jaden, I think, have more offensive opportunities in a game like this, where, Patrick Williams is probably a better guy to have guard Jaden McDaniels in this game, just because Patrick Williams is 6'8", 6'9", has more of a frame similar to Jaden's, but he was asked to guard Julius Randle tonight. So Jaden was able to take advantage of that, playing against a worse defender, and Josh Giddey, who's a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner, not quite as quick side to side. So I think when there's matchups that clearly call for Jaden to be more aggressive offensively, I think you almost see more confidence in him, because he knows, like, all right, I've got to be a dude that's scoring in this game.
Right.
So that's certainly part of it for me. And the other part of it too is like, if you're playing a team that's going to turn the ball over a lot and there's going to be opportunities for you to get out and run in transition, I think Jaden McDaniels has been a really strong transition player for the majority of his career. And considering that he spends a lot of time defending, bigger point guards or playmakers, he's on the perimeter more. So when there is a turnover, he's one of those guys that's going to peel out and run in transition. And again, tonight,
that makes sense.
Wolves have 20 points off of 13 Bulls turnovers. So good opportunity for him to, to get out and be a factor in those types of situations. And then the other thing too, while we're talking about guys who have struggled a little bit, we have to shout out Mike Conley as well. 14 points and 11 assists after what's been a pretty slow start for Mike. I think he's still kind of figuring out what his role needs to be and how his, offensive game needs to change, both as a playmaker and as a scorer, now that he's playing in more 3-guard lineups with Nikhil and with Dante. So I think with Mike, he's just so smart and he's so unselfish that I don't think he's going to try to, force it too much. I think if anything, he's going to not necessarily be as aggressive as he might need to be. And I think today was one of those games that was important for him to kind of grab control of the steering wheel going against a big and Nikola Vucevic that is not known for his defense and is a guy that has traditionally struggled against guards that are able to shoot that floater like Mike is and also defend bigs who are lob threats like Rudy Gobert is. So it was nice to see Mike get on track and knock down some open shots as well.
Big breath of fresh air for sure. And I know we could spend 30 minutes on Ant every night. I always just like spending quick 2 or 3, just spotlight him. I know you said he played more below the arc tonight, but 9-game sample now of him in this new version, both tonight and kind of big picture. What's really sticking out about the way his game is kind of evolving now, especially without Cat on the floor for the first time in his career consistently night in and night out, like you talked about with the spacing and what have you?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, Ant never really, since Rudy Gobert got here, obviously when Rudy got here initially, Carl had that calf injury and missed a ton of time. So Ant was playing in more of a 2-man game with Rudy Gobert and played more directly, I think, with Rudy Gobert than he did with Karl Anthony Towns, really. For the remainder of the time that Carl was in Minnesota. So I think with Ant, this is now kind of the first season, in my opinion, that we're really starting to see Ant show more consistent flashes of being able to be a playmaker and find Rudy Gobert, whether it be on the short roll in the pocket or throwing it up for lobs. I think he feels a lot more comfortable throwing that lob. And I think Rudy is starting to understand that, and Rudy's starting to be more ready for that lob. I think last year we started to see Ant add more of a floater. That was something that was a very clear point of emphasis for him to develop before last season. And now that he's got that floater, I think defenses are going to come out to him more, and you're going to see more of those lobs up to Gobert. So that's part of it, and that was, I think that's something to kind of file away. And that's going to become more important as defenses start to stretch out and defend Ant to the 3-point line a little bit more. I think, last season especially, and even in early parts of this season, I think defenses have been okay letting Ant just be a jump shooter. And that's just something that might have to change now. And you consider that Ant, again, wasn't really a big 3-point shooting night for Ant. Didn't really feel like it, but he's 5 of 9 from 3. And he certainly did play more below the arc, especially in the first half, was more of an isolation player in the mid-range and got all the way to the rim. And then you saw in that third quarter, 3 straight attacks at the rim to start and kind of set a tone. But then what did he go back to? And he went back to the 3-point ball when the team really needed it in the fourth quarter. And I think he's got a lot more confidence in his 3-point shot. And he knows that Chris Finch wants his team to shoot more threes. And it's him leading by example and saying, hey, coach, you want us to shoot more threes? You want to know what I'm going to do? I'm going to shoot more threes. And the thing is, too, is I think we would all be a little bit more skeptical or leery of Ant shooting more threes if a lot of these were ill-advised shots or shots that were out of rhythm, not necessarily in the flow of the offense. But a lot of these shots have been smart shots, good shots, where you're not kind of rolling your eyes into your back of your head when he's taking those shots. And I think that's another part of it, which makes this feel a little bit more sustainable. So if he can continue to shoot the ball the way that he has, it's going to force defenses out more. It's going to force defenses to send another guy at him. And if that's the case, especially in pick and roll where Ant's wanting to shoot a lot more pull-up threes and pick and roll with Gobert, if that second guy is going to step up to Ant to try to take away that three, and he's now able to throw that pass over the top of the defense and hit Gobert and trust that Gobert can either, score at the rim or make that short roll kick out pass to the corner or whatever the case may be, this offense is just going to be a lot more dangerous. And that's not even accounting too for the fact that, if defenses have to close out to Ant more or are more concerned about him as a 3-point shooter, and then you see him just get loose on the drive, we all know what he can do on the drive and at the rim. So I think that he's just taken another step offensively. And, last year, you'd probably say that it would have come from the playmaking, but the fact that it's coming from his shooting, I think is going to open more doors and make those reads for him as a playmaker a little bit easier. So it's just been a lot of fun to watch. It's a very different player, and it feels like his scoring this season has been far easier and has taken a lot less energy out of him. Like, it feels more sustainable.
It feels a little bit more effortless, for sure.
100%. And that matters when you consider, again, like, the Wolves are going to play tomorrow night. And then, they've got a lot of games here in the next 2 weeks. So I think if he can continue to score at a high level without, just burning through all the gas in the tank, I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah, much more efficient, it feels like, just his overall game, and he's turning into the Swiss Army knife of just more tools in the bag, so to speak, and absolutely loving this version of Ant we've got through these 9 games. Goes without saying. A couple minutes left. Let's talk about this Portland game coming up. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with work, projects, and more, it's so easy to let your priorities start to slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, they're more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, it's time to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. So simple. All you got to do, you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Okay, schedule coming up. Trailblazers tomorrow night on that back-to-back, back at home at the Target Center in the backyard. When you see that Portland lineup, I guess, what's one of the top 1 or 2 things you think of first, especially after tonight's game? What do you think Finchie is going to kind of be preaching in the locker room before tip-off?
Yeah, I think number one thing that you've got to be aware of with Portland is their offensive rebounding ability. They've got 2 really talented centers in DeAndre Ayton and Donovan Clingan, the rookie from UConn, who is tremendous for them on their run to winning the national championship last season. And so I think when you look at it too, like, they've got 2 really talented guys out there, and then they've got 2 pretty talented guys in the backcourt with Anthony Simons and Scoot Henderson. And then you also have Jeremy Grant on the perimeter, who again, is capable of giving you 30 points on any given night if you don't come up to play. And then they also added Denny Avdia in a great trade for them earlier this offseason, which was a really shrewd move. And Shaedon Sharpe is back now for them as another hyper athletic wing that's capable of scoring 15, 20, 25 points in a game that can also shoot the ball pretty well. And I think too, a lot of the guys on Portland's team have really underperformed as 3-point shooters so far this season. They're kind of due for some 3-point shooting progression to the mean, if you will. So, I just don't think it's a team that you can really take lightly. I think it's a lot more talented of a group than the team that they were rolling out tanking at the end of last season. And I think the Wolves play them 3 times in the next week. So it's going to be really important that the Timberwolves show up defensively. And if they roll out another defensive effort like they did in the first half of tonight's game, I don't think this Portland team will have a whole lot of trouble putting up points in a hurry, despite the fact that they're 25th in offense. I think they're probably a better team than 25th in offense. And they're about middle of the pack defensively. They're 17th defensively right now. And I think they're probably a little bit worse than that. So I think there's kind of some, water finding its level a little bit that still needs to happen with them as they work out some kinks in their rotation and, and they're kind of treading water and hoping that Scoot can play a little better and they get some more minutes for Donovan Clingan if they, trade Ayton before the trade deadline. But I think it's a much more talented team than people might think when they look at the Blazers and, and they see that they're 3-5 so far this season. And, a couple of their wins have been, the Clippers without Kawhi, the Pelicans without Zion and without DeJounte Murray and without CJ McCollum. And so it's just a team that I don't think you can take super lightly. And the Timberwolves should win. They should win at least 2 of those 3 games that they're going to play against Portland. But again, it's another good test for a team of saying, hey, like games you should win, good games, good opportunities for them to still be able to develop some chemistry. But at the same time, like you got to show up to play. And those are generally the games where Rudy Gobert especially, but also having Mike Conley and Dante DiVincenzo and, and some professional veterans on this group that certainly will have to come to play and set a tone of professionalism and be ready to go.
Yeah, it's so true. No matter the sport, the best teams go win the games you're supposed to win, and there is no gimmies on any given night, no matter the sport. You could be talking NFL, baseball, you name it, but especially the NBA, there is no gimmies, and you got to show up for 4 quarters and go get that dub. I got like 15, 20 minutes worth of topics still left in the holster. I'm going to leave it on deck, locked and loaded for tomorrow night. You guys are going to have to come back and join me and Jack tomorrow night. Great stuff, though, as always, man. Wolves claw their way back. They explode in the fourth quarter. Final score versus the Bulls, 135-119. They moved to 5-3 on the year. For reference, they didn't score 130 points or more all season last year. So just great signs for the offense, just in general, moving forward for sure. As always, huge shout out to all the everydayers out there that always make us your first listen. We're going to be doing these postcasts all season long. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and go follow all the works, Jack's work on X at JRBorman13. Jack, you going to be live from the Target Center tomorrow night?
Sure will be.
Locked and loaded, man. Star-studded talent we got with us. Wolves, Portland tomorrow night. We'll catch you next time, but until then, signing out.